Chapter 83. Today was the 7th and final day of the festival and the tournament. What happened yesterday night? I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. I don't recall Ren and I silently walking back to our respective residences without making eye contact. I definitely don't remember Seal somehow obtaining a photograph of a very specific moment and teasing me with it endlessly. Nope, nothing like that happened at all. With yesterday's mysterious incident completely erased from my memory, let's move on and enjoy the festival like responsible adults. Kicking things off today was the main draw, the climax everyone had been waiting for. The semi-finals, followed immediately by the finals. And the first semi-final match was already enough to make me sigh. Seal vs. Gobta. Poor Gobta. After that incident in the quarterfinals, Gobta and Ranga by association had been put through a brutal crash course in proper combat usage of overwhelming power. Their instructors, Milam and Cat. Yes, that Milam and that Cat. Milam was currently sitting right next to me in the VIP seats, legs swinging happily, surrounded by her usual entourage. Since the moment she arrived, she'd been proudly explaining at high volume just how wonderfully she had trained Gobta and Ranga. I taught him how to go fast without smashing into walls. And how to punch. And how to not faint right away. Isn't that amazing? Truly inspiring, I replied weakly, nodding along. Gobta's survival rate was already looking questionable. As for Cat, her own semifinal match was coming up right after this one. Cat vs. Shinsha. If I had to rank my daughters in terms of raw strength, Shinsha was undeniably at the top. Cat followed closely behind her, then Luna, and finally Shizu. Despite being the eldest, Shizu was technically the weakest among them. That said, for reasons I still couldn't fully explain, the others were far more afraid of making Shizu angry than anyone else. Experience, perhaps, or maybe instinct. Either way, as I looked down at the arena, now being prepared for the first semifinal bout, I couldn't help but smile. Are you ready for the first bout of today's semifinals? Sokka shouted into the microphone, her voice ringing across the Coliseum. The response was immediate. The crowd erupted. Cheers thundered through the stands, far louder than any round before. Banners waved, voices clashed, and excitement crackled in the air like static. Most of that roar was directed at one name. Seal. The story had spread like wildfire, the forbidden love between a demon lord and her maid. A knight who had sworn her heart, her blade, and her very existence to her master. Romance, devotion, tragedy, the crowd loved it all. Seal had gained a staggering number of supporters. As for Gobta, well, a few scattered cheers rose for him here and there, quickly drowned out by the sea of voices chanting her name. Poor guy, popularity had never really been his strong suit. I was idly observing all this when Sokka raised her mic again, letting the noise die down just enough. Then let us begin, she declared, introducing the first contender of today's semifinals. The crowd leaned forward, a knight in maid's attire. A warrior whose devotion carried her this far. Will her love carve a path to victory? Or will this battle mark the end of a forbidden romance? Sokka swept her arm toward the gate. Please welcome Lady Seal. The left gate slowly opened. A hush fell over the arena. Seal stepped forward with measured, elegant strides. Her classic black and white maid uniform was immaculate, every fold perfect. Her posture was straight, refined, each step calm and unhurried, as though the battlefield itself was beneath her concern. Her mask concealed her face completely, polished and expressionless, lending her an air of mystery and quiet intimidation. Yet even without seeing her eyes, everyone could feel it, the unwavering resolve, the absolute confidence. As she came to a halt at the center of the arena, the crowd erupted once more, louder than before. And I could only think one thing. Gobta, you're really in trouble. And now, folks, let's welcome our second competitor. Sokka announced, her voice booming across the arena. Gobta, will he defy all odds and stand victorious, or will this be the end of his journey here today? Give it up for Gobta. The crowd's response was mixed. A few cheers rang out, drowned beneath a much larger wave of murmurs and awkward clapping. Gobta himself mirrored that energy perfectly. He entered the arena from the right gate, walking sluggishly, his body swaying left and right as if he might collapse at any moment. Dark circles hung heavily under his eyes, clear evidence of a sleepless night. Milam, sitting proudly nearby, was enthusiastically explaining how thoroughly she had trained Gobta and Ranga all night long. Though calling it training felt generous. From what I could tell, it mostly involved Gobta being repeatedly thrown into fights against Milam and Cat until dawn. They held back, of course, but still. I couldn't help but pity him. Poor Gobta. He finally took his position opposite Seal, letting out a wide yawn as his eyes struggled to stay open, standing face to face with a maid whose presence alone radiated calm, danger, and absolute confidence. The contrast couldn't have been sharper. Quote. Ah, and I've just received a message from a certain anonymous fan for Gobta, Soka said, holding up a letter with visible excitement. She cleared her throat and read aloud, "Don't make the same mistake again, and if you lose, I will have you eat a special cake specially made by Xian, and you have to attend another session of training. Good luck." Soka folded the letter and grinned at the crowd. Look at that, folks. If Gobta loses, his anonymous fan has thoughtfully prepared a special cake made by Lady Xian herself, the first secretary of Lady Rimuru. What an honor. She announced it as if it were meant to lift Gobta's spirits after a defeat, but I was sure she knew better. That wasn't a reward, that was a punishment, and I was absolutely certain who had come up with such a cruel fate. I clasped my hands together and silently prayed, hoping Gobta would somehow survive eating a cake made by Xian. Oblivious to my growing dread, the crowd erupted into cheers, buzzing with excitement and speculation over the identity of this mysterious, anonymous fan. The moment Gobta heard the so-called punishment, his face went deathly pale. His body began to tremble, and in an instant, every trace of sleepiness vanished from his expression. So I decided to pretend that was a good thing. Ready, Soka announced, raising her hand high. And began. At her signal, the match began. Third-person POV. Gobta was sweating bullets. After hearing what awaited him if he lost, fear had completely overtaken his body. He and Ranga had spent the entire night fighting against Milam and Kat. The bracelet provided by Ramirez had only prevented him from dying, it did nothing to dull the pain. As Kat had bluntly put it, if you can feel pain, you'll learn faster. And that was when the nightmare truly began. After an entire night of relentless, merciless training, Gobta had barely managed to grasp even the basics from Milam and Kat. His body still remembered every blow, every impact, every moment of despair. He refused to go through that hell again. Gobta's eyes ignited with fierce resolve. He would not lose, and no matter what, he would never experience that nightmare again. Ready, Soka announced, raising her hand high. And began. The moment Gobta heard it, he moved. He lunged straight toward Seal without a second's hesitation, his short sword flashing as he swung with everything he had. His movements were sharper than before, cleaner, faster, every strike a result of the brutal training drilled into him by Milam and Kat. But it was meaningless. Seal sidestepped with effortless grace. She didn't even draw her sword. Gobta's blade cut through empty air as Seal slipped past it as though she had foreseen the attack. There was no rush in her movements, no wasted motion, only calm, absolute control. Ever cautious, Gobta didn't press his luck. The instant he realized how easily she had avoided his strike, he leapt backward, putting distance between them. Cold sweat ran down his spine. This opponent was on an entirely different level. Even though a normal person would have given up, the little goblin did not. Whether it was sheer guts or the terror of the punishment awaiting him, Gobta steeled himself and prepared for another attack. He planted his feet, raised his scabbard, and pointed it straight at Seal. Case cannon, he shouted. The scabbard wasn't ordinary. Coiled wire ran along its core, magisteel lined the inside, and a replaceable projectile rested at the base. Black thunder personally imbued into it by Rimuru surged through the mechanism, launching the projectile like a railgun. Put simply, it was a gun disguised as a scabbard. The magisteel round fired with a thunderous crack, tearing through the air at lightning speed. Against a normal human, it would have been instant defeat. Even high-ranking monsters like Bavix or Equix would have suffered severe damage. But Gobta's opponent was Seal. In a single, seamless moment, a katana formed in Seal's hand as if drawn from the void itself. The very next instant, she slashed diagonally upward. Clang! The blade met the projectile head-on, splitting it cleanly in two. The severed halves screamed past her on either side, embedding themselves deep into the arena wall behind her. Seal stood unmoved, her posture perfect, her expression hidden behind her mask. Gobta's heart sank. That attack hadn't even made her flinch. A wave of whispers rippled through the stadium. Gasps mixed with disbelief as the crowd processed what they had just witnessed, not only the effortless way Seal had split the projectile in two, but also the sheer absurdity of the weapon Gobta had just used. High-ranking nobles from other nations leaned forward in their seats, eyes locked onto Gobta's scabbard with naked intrigue. Some exchanged hushed words, already calculating its military value. Meanwhile, the Otherworlders reacted very differently. Hinata pressed a hand to her temple, letting out a long, tired sigh, while Yuki glanced sideways at Rimuru with an expression that clearly said, "You even recreated that." Both of them recognized it immediately. A gun, or at least, something uncomfortably close to one. Down in the arena, Gobta clicked his tongue in frustration. TCH. He lowered his scabbard slightly, shoulders slumping. "I wanted to see how far I could go on my own," he muttered, his voice heavy with self-disgust. "But this is hopeless." For the first time since the match began, the fire in his eyes wavered not from fear, but from the crushing realization of the gap between them. Before him stood Seal, unmoving, untouched. A wall he couldn't even begin to climb. "It's time to use this my ultimate power," Gobta shouted. Up in the VIP box, Rimuru's gaze flicked between the arena and Milam, who was watching Gobta with unsettling sharpness. "If he messes up again," Rimuru murmured under her breath, "he might actually be killed." Down below, completely unaware of the tension above him, Gobta raised his voice again. "Transform." The air around him distorted violently. A familiar howl echoed through the arena as Ranga materialized behind him. He didn't stop there. Ranga's massive form dissolved into swirling light and shadow, flowing forward and merging with Gobta. In seconds, the transformation was complete. Where Gobta once stood was now a tall, bipedal figure. Ranga's frame, Ranga's claws, Ranga's fangs, yet unmistakably Gobta at its core. Power rolled off him in visible waves. The crowd erupted. Soka nearly shouted into the mic, her voice crackling with excitement. "Unbelievable, Gobta has unified with his summon once again. Will this end in another self-elimination like last time? Or has he learned from his previous failure and forged an entirely new strategy?" All eyes turned back to the arena. And toward Seal. How will she react? Gobta dashed forward at lightning speed, claws bared and ready to tear through anything in his path. Seal, however, remained perfectly calm. The instant Gobta closed the distance, she leapt aside, her movement effortless. She spun once in midair, one clean, elegant flip, and landed gracefully behind him, not a strand of her uniform out of place. But this time, Gobta didn't overcommit. Just before he could charge himself out of the arena, he halted, claws scraping against the stone as he dug in and stopped. His training from the previous night had paid off. Slowly, Gobta turned. Unlike before, his movements were no longer awkward. He wielded Ranga's body and strength as if they were truly his own, the fusion no longer unstable but controlled. Seal noticed. Her katana vanished soundlessly, dissolving into light. She raised her fists instead, settling into a calm, ready stance. This was no longer a match decided by skill alone. It was a true close-quarters fight. Gobta leapt forward once more, claws sharpened and poised to strike. Seal reacted instantly. She slipped past his attack, jumping forward as his claws tore through empty air. Gobta slammed into the spot where Seal had been standing. The ground cracked and shook under the force of his landing. Without hesitation, Gobta kicked off the stone and charged again, closing the distance in a blink. This time, Seal did not dodge. She stood her ground. As Gobta raised his arm and brought his claws down in a diagonal slash, Seal stepped into the attack instead of away from it. Her fist moved, a single punch faster than lightning. It drove straight into Gobta's gut. The impact detonated through his body. Gobta was hurled backward, skidding violently across the arena floor. He tumbled, barely managing to regain control before being thrown out entirely. With a snarl, he dug his feet into the ground, claws carving deep grooves into the stone as he forced himself to stop. Dust settled. Gobta remained standing, but the difference in power was now undeniable. The crowd erupted. A wave of cheers crashed through the arena as CL's supporters screamed her name, excitement exploding all at once. Some spectators jumped to their feet, fists raised in triumph. Others went pale. You could see it clearly, faces stiff with shock, throats bobbing as they swallowed, eyes locked onto the lone figure standing calmly in the arena. The force of that single punch had been too clean, too precise. And then Soka's voice rang out, barely containing her excitement. WWHAAAATA blow. She shouted into the magic mic. Did you see that, folks? No sword, no technique, just a single step forward and boom. A direct hit to the core. She leaned forward, eyes wide. That wasn't just strength, that was perfect timing and control. Gobta was unified with Ranga, moving at lightning speed, and she still intercepted him. Head on. The cheers swelled again. Is this really just a maid? Soka continued dramatically. Or are we witnessing something far more terrifying? Her voice dropped, filled with awe. Lady Seal hasn't even broken her rhythm yet, and Gupta's already been blown back. High-ranking nobles exchanged uneasy glances. Veterans narrowed their eyes. Warriors who had laughed earlier were now completely silent. Sokka raised her hand again, excitement blazing. Folks, if this keeps up, this match may be decided much sooner than anyone expected. Meanwhile, inside VIP box, Rimuru glanced sideways, instinctively bracing herself. She had half expected Milam to be pouting, or worse, angry after seeing Gupta get sent flying so effortlessly. But instead, Milam was smiling, not her usual smug or playful grin. This one was sharp, curious. Her eyes were fixed on Seal, gleaming with interest, as if she were watching something genuinely fascinating. Oh, Rimuru let out a small, surprised sound before she could stop herself. Milam's attention immediately snapped to her. She turned her head, tilting it slightly, her expression openly inquisitive. Did you want to ask something? Was written all over her face. Rimuru coughed lightly and lowered her voice. Nothing, I was just wondering, she said carefully. You're not angry that Gupta's getting beaten so easily? Milam's smile widened. He's doing better than I expected, she replied casually. Besides, he's fighting you. There's no way he'd win. What? Rimuru blinked, genuinely startled, turning fully toward her. What do you mean he's against me? Milam puffed out her non-existent chest, and spoke with unmistakable smugness. You can't fool me. That's the real you down there, she declared confidently. And you here, she pointed at Rimuru, pouting slightly. You're a clone, aren't you? She leaned closer, clearly dissatisfied. You should have told me. I wanted to enter the tournament too. Rimuru blinked, genuinely surprised. What do you mean? Milam crossed her arms, still pouting, but her eyes were sharp, far too sharp to be brushed off. You really think I wouldn't notice? She said. I can see it. You're Rimuru, but it's the same with her, too. She feels exactly like you. Her gaze returned to the arena, locking onto Seal. Something's a little different, Milam admitted, tapping her chin. But I'm sure of it. That's you. Rimuru let out a quiet sigh, shoulders relaxing as she finally gave up. Okay, I admit it, she said softly. In a way, that is me. But, she turned to Milam, her expression serious for once. Seal is also a real person. That much is important. It's a secret, so I can't tell you anything more than that. I'm sorry. For a moment, Milam simply stared at her. Then she broke into a bright, confident smile. Don't worry, bestie, she said cheerfully. I trust you, I won't ask you anything about it. Rimuru smiled back, relief evident, and gently patted Milam on the head. Milam happily accepted it, grinning like nothing had ever been wrong. Back in the arena, Gupta was rapidly losing his cool. With a frustrated snarl, he lunged forward again, claws slashing wildly as he pressed the attack without pause. His movements were fast, far faster than before, yet they lacked rhythm, desperation seeping into every strike. Seal, meanwhile, remained perfectly composed. She stepped aside with effortless grace, her movements minimal and precise. A half step here, a slight turn there. Gupta's frantic blows passed through empty air again and again, never coming close to connecting. She didn't counter. It was as if she were calmly observing a storm, allowing it to rage itself out. Each missed strike only made Gupta more frantic, his breathing growing heavier, his footing less stable. The gap between their skill was unmistakable and painfully clear to everyone watching. Gupta leapt backward, skidding across the arena floor to create distance between them. Dust settled as he steadied his stance. Seal remained where she was, standing casually at the center of the arena, calm, unbothered, almost relaxed. Then Gupta vanished. In a burst of speed, he dashed straight toward her. At the very last moment, just as he closed in, Gupta separated from Ranga. The maneuver was sudden. Gupta swung his short sword in a wide horizontal slash, aiming to force Seal to evade. And she did. Seal sprang upward to dodge the blade. But that was exactly what Ranga had been waiting for. Ranga lunged from behind Gupta, intending to slam into Seal midair and drive her straight out of the arena. For a split second, it looked like the plan might work. Then, Seal's hand shot out. In midair, she grabbed Ranga by the ears. Using his own momentum, she twisted, executing a flawless front flip. The motion was smooth, almost effortless, like a dancer turning in the air. With a sharp pivot of her hips, she redirected all that force and hurled Ranga clean out of the arena. The massive wolf sailed across the boundary and crashed beyond it in a cloud of dust. Gobta smirked. It wasn't panic. It wasn't desperation. It was the grin of someone who had finally cornered his opponent. Raising his scabbard, he leveled it straight at Ciel's airborne form. Case cannon. A flash of lightning erupted from the scabbard's mouth. The magisteel projectile launched instantly, no arc, no delay, accelerating like a railgun shot, tearing through the air. With a thunderous crack, perfect timing, Ciel was still mid-air, her body twisted from throwing Ranga out of bounds. There was no footing to push off from, no ground to redirect herself. The projectile was already upon her, moving at lightning speed. Too fast to sidestep, and after dealing with Ranga, she had barely a heartbeat to ready her weapon. For the first time in the match, Ciel had no obvious way out. The crowd gasped as the gleaming magisteel round screamed toward her, its trajectory flawless, its intent unmistakable. This wasn't luck, this was Gobta's strategy. Just as Gobta planned, the magisteel projectile struck. Not a graze, not a near miss. It hit. For the first time in the entire bout, Ciel failed to evade. The round tore through her side, the impact sounding dull and sickening as it breached her defenses. Blood burst forth in a vivid arc, splashing across the arena floor. A collective gasp ripped through the Colosseum. Yet even then, Ciel twisted midair and landed gracefully, boots touching the ground as if she had merely stepped down from a stair. Her posture remained upright, composed, but crimson spread rapidly across her uniform. For a heartbeat, the arena was dead silent. Then, wait a second, Sokka's voice cracked through the stunned air. Lady Ciel has been hit. The crowd exploded into chaos. She's bleeding. That actually landed. That goblin did it, he hit her. Is this real? Sokka barely kept up, her voice racing with disbelief. I can't believe what I'm seeing, folks. After dodging everything until now, Lady Ciel has taken a direct hit. Is this the turning point? Cheers erupted from Gobta's supporters, few as they were, but they were loud, desperate, filled with sudden hope. Could this be it? Sokka shouted. Has Gobta finally found his opening? Is this his chance to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat? Even those cheering for Ciel fell silent, hands clasped, faces pale. Blood continued to drip from her wound, pattering softly against the stone. Yet Ciel did not fall. She straightened slowly, calm, unshaken, her masked gaze lifted and settled on Gobta. And for some reason, despite the blood, despite the injury, a chill crept through the arena. Because it didn't look like Ciel was losing. It looked like she was acknowledging him. The very next moment, Ranga moved. The wolf vanished in a blur, his massive body surging forward with terrifying speed, aimed straight at Ciel, intent on tackling her before she could even draw a breath. Ciel twisted aside at the very last instant. Ranga thundered past, and didn't stop. His claws dug into the stone as he pivoted mid-stride, muscles coiling, then he launched himself again, relentless and precise. There was no pause, no hesitation, no opening. And then, Icicle Lance. Gobta's voice rang out from the rear. Shards of compressed ice screamed through the air, launched from a safe distance while Ciel was still dealing with Ranga. The timing was perfect, forcing her to split her focus. The battle turned vicious. Again and again, Ciel struck. A lightning-fast punch sent Ranga flying out of the arena. A perfectly placed kick hurled him beyond the boundary stones. But it didn't matter. Ranga was a summon. Just when it seemed he had been thrown completely out of the arena, he leapt forth from Gobta's shadow as if nothing were amiss. The crowd erupted in protest. Wasn't he already out of the ring? That's unfair. That's cheating. K-ha-ha-ha-ha. Diablo's laughter crackled through the microphone. A re-summon does not violate the rules. His words cut through the complaints instantly, silencing the crowd one by one. Instead of meeting Ranga head-on, Ciel stepped forward, aimed straight for Gobta. Instantly, Gobta reacted. He bolted backward, putting distance between them, retreating the moment Ciel so much as leaned his way. More icicles flew, forcing her to dodge again as Ranga lunged in from the side. The pattern became clear. Gobta wasn't trying to overpower her. He was cornering her, never allowing her a moment to counterattack. Never letting her close the distance. Using Ranga as an unrelenting battering ram while he stayed safely out of reach. A dirty strategy, an underhanded one, but undeniably effective. Sokka's voice rang out again, sharp with excitement. Incredible. Gobta is controlling the flow of the match. He's turned this into a war of attrition. Blood still stained Ciel's uniform. Yet her movements remained precise, calculated. Her masked gaze flicked between Ranga and Gobta. Cold, focused. If Gobta thought this would end quickly, he was gravely mistaken. While in the stands, the reaction split sharply, though outrage clearly dominated. So dirty. That's not a real fight. What a cowardly way to battle. Fight properly, you bastard. Have some pride as a warrior. Angry voices overlapped, the crowd's discontent rippling through the stands like a rising tide. Shut up. There's no such thing as a cowardly tactic on a battlefield. Gobta shouted at the audience. The only thing that matters is who's still standing at the end. A few faces in the stands stiffened, his words clearly striking a nerve. Some warriors fell silent, brows furrowing as they mulled over his point. Others exchanged uneasy glances, grudgingly acknowledging the truth behind it. But most responded with sharp glares and open irritation. Don't lecture us. That's just an excuse. So you call hiding strategy now? TCH still cheap. Boos mixed with mutters of reluctant consideration, the arena buzzing with divided opinion. Gobta ignored the roar of the crowd and pressed the attack together with Ranga. Seal flipped backward, her heel smashing into Ranga's chest and sending the massive wolf skidding toward the edge of the arena. Stone cracked beneath the impact. She landed, and her footing slipped, just a fraction. Enough. Gobta's eyes widened. Now, he dashed forward without hesitation, short sword raised for the finishing strike. From behind, Ranga lunged again, claws extended, both of them closing in at the same time. A perfect pincer. The crowd gasped. She slipped. Both sides she can't dodge. Is this it? For a fraction of a second, it truly looked like Seal was finished. Then, she smiled beneath the mask. The slip wasn't a mistake. It was a signal. The moment they entered her range, Seal let the slip take her. Her body twisted sharply, both legs whipping around in a single, violent spin, the motion so fast it tore lines through the air. The kick landed like a blunt execution, the impact cracking stone beneath her and detonating between them. Her heel slammed into Gobta's chest with bone-shattering force, knocking the wind from his lungs and hurling him backward like a discarded doll. The spin didn't stop there. Her other leg whipped around, crashing down across Ranga's snout mid-lunge. His head snapped sideways with a sickening crack, and the wolf skidded across the arena floor, leaving a spray of shattered stone in his wake. Unbelievable. Sokka's voice rang through the arena, barely audible over the uproar. With a single spin, Lady Seal shut down both Gobta and Ranga at once. The crowd erupted into chaos. She baited them. She kicked both of them at the same time. She is so strong, a monster. Gobta, slammed against the arena wall by the sheer force of Seal's spin kick, crumpled to the ground. His chest heaved, pain radiating through his body, leaving him barely conscious. Ranga fared no better, skidding across the arena floor with a grunt of exertion, claws scraping stone, head spinning. The match had ended decisively. Sokka immediately ran towards Gobta, giving him full potion, while Diablo did the same for Ranga. Then both were quickly whisked off to the infirmary, leaving the arena empty except for Seal. Then Sokka raised her microphone, her voice cutting through the roaring crowd. And the winner of this semi-final match is Lady Seal. The crowd erupted into deafening cheers, some standing, some waving banners, all chanting her name. Seal, Seal, Seal. Nobles, adventurers, and spectators alike were in stunned awe. Whispers rippled through the stands. She didn't just win, she dominated. Did you see that spin kick? Both of them at once. Her strategy, her speed, she's on another level. Sokka, struggling to contain her excitement, added with a grin, with such overwhelming skill and poise, Lady Seal advances to the finals. Truly, a maid whose love and loyalty drives her strength to unparalleled heights. The crowd's cheers intensified, some even waving flags and banners in honor of her victory, cementing the legendary status of CL's performance in the semifinals. Once again, Sokka's voice rang out, electrifying the arena. And now, ladies and gentlemen, our second semifinal match of the day. The crowd leaned forward, every eye fixed on the gates, buzzing with anticipation. From the left gate, the whirlwind of chaos herself, the dual-blade Princess Katarina. The gates groaned open, and Katarina exploded into the arena like a storm. Twin swords flashing under the lights, she spun and twirled them with effortless precision, her sharp grin radiating both confidence and ferocity. The audience roared in response, cheers and shouts reverberating across the stands. And from the right gate, a disciplined and formidable warrior, every strike swift and precise, the incomparable Shinsha. Shinsha stepped forward with serene, measured grace. Her movements were smooth and purposeful, each step exuding poise and latent power. Though calm, the faint tension in her posture hinted at devastating skill ready to strike. The crowd erupted in a mix of awe and excitement, drawn to the contrast between chaos and control. Soka's voice rose even higher with energy. Both fighters have dazzled us with their skill in the earlier rounds, and today, only one can claim victory and advance to the finals. The arena seemed to vibrate with tension. Banners waved, chants rose, and the spectators, collective breath held as two forces of nature faced off. Chaos versus precision, power versus grace. The semi-final was ready and every soul in the arena waited for the inevitable clash. Fighters, take your positions. Soka raised her arm high, the arena falling into tense silence. And when you're ready, a heartbeat passed. Begin. Katarina moved first. She vanished in a burst of speed, twin blades screaming through the air as she closed the distance in an instant. Her fighting style was wild yet refined, every step explosive, every swing heavy with killing intent. Shinsha didn't retreat. She drew her sword in one smooth motion, the blade singing softly as it left its scabbard. Her stance was simple, grounded, no wasted motion, no unnecessary flourish. Steel met air. Katarina's right blade came down in a vicious diagonal slash, but Shinsha intercepted it with a clean parry, sparks scattering across the arena floor. In the same motion, Shinsha twisted her wrist and slashed toward Katarina's side. Clang! The blade struck, but instead of flesh, it rebounded as if hitting solid metal. A faint ripple shimmered across the space around Katarina's body, like heat distortion in the air. Katarina grinned. Surprised, she pressed the attack relentlessly. Her twin swords came from all angles, left, right, overhead, forcing Shinsha to step back for the first time. Each strike carried brutal force, yet Shinsha deflected them one by one, her movements precise, her breathing steady. Then, Shinsha stepped in. She slid past a horizontal slash, her sword flashing as she aimed straight for Katarina's throat. The blade stopped a finger's breadth away. The invisible armor flared again, this time brighter. Shinsha's eyes narrowed, not in frustration, but understanding. So that's how it works, she murmured. Katarina laughed and kicked off the ground, spinning midair as she brought both blades crashing down. Shinsha blocked, the impact cracking the arena tiles beneath her feet. The crowd erupted. This is insane, Soka shouted. Katarina's overwhelming offense versus Shinsha's flawless defense, and that barrier magic is changing everything. Shinsha exhaled slowly, her grip on the sword tightened. If cutting won't work, she shifted her stance, blade lowering slightly, no longer aiming to slice, but to break. Then all adapt. The air around them seemed to tense, as if the battle itself had realized it was only just beginning. Katarina exploded forward. Her invisible armor flared faintly as she slammed through Shinsha's guard, forcing her back step by step. Twin blades came in relentless arcs, wild, merciless, unyielding. Shinsha blocked. Once. Twice. The third strike hit like a battering ram. Boom! Shinsha skidded across the arena floor, boots screeching as she fought to keep her balance. Dust kicked up around her feet as she barely managed to plant her sword into the stone, stopping herself inches from the arena's edge. The crowd gasped. She's almost out, Soka shouted, barely keeping her voice steady. Katarina didn't slow. She pounced. Her blades blurred as she spun, using pure momentum to drive Shinsha even farther back. A kick followed fast and brutal, slamming into Shinsha's ribs and sending her airborne. Shinsha twisted midair, landing on one knee at the very lip of the ring. One more step, just one, and it would be over. The invisible armor around Katarina pulsed as she charged again, eyes blazing. End of the line. She brought both swords down in a crushing X-shaped strike, aiming not to cut but to knock Shinsha clean out of the arena. The crowd roared. Shinsha looked down. There was no room left behind her. The drop beyond the ring yawned wide. For a split second, even the spectators held their breath. Then Shinsha smiled, small, calm, unwavering. She let go of defense. She stepped forward instead of back. Her sword shifted not to block, but to anchor. The blade plunged straight into the arena floor as Katarina's attack landed. The impact sent shockwaves through the stone, cracks spider webbing beneath them. Shinsha's boots slid but stopped. Right at the edge, sparks and dust filled the air as Katarina skidded past her, momentarily overextended. This match isn't over yet, Shinsha said quietly, eyes sharp. The crowd erupted again, louder than before. What a save, Soka cried. Shinsha was this close to being ringed out, but she turned Katarina's own momentum against her. Katarina landed and spun around, laughing, excitement blazing across her face. Oh, now that's fun. Both fighters reset, one fueled by chaos, the other by unshakable resolve, standing inches from the edge where victory and defeat were separated by a single step. Shinsha exhaled once. Then she moved. Her sword flashed not defensively, but decisively. Katarina's twin blades came down in a crossing strike, only to be deflected aside in a sharp clang. Shinsha didn't retreat. She stepped into the opening and struck. Once. The invisible armor rippled. Twice. A faint distortion spread across the armor. She's pushing her back, Sokka said in disbelief. Katarina attacked again, wild, overwhelming, a storm of steel. Shinsha met it head-on. Parry. Sidestep. Counter. Her movements tightened, each motion cleaner than the last. With every exchange, her speed increased, blades snapping through the air faster, sharper, more precise. Clang/impact. Each parry flowed seamlessly into a counterstrike. Shinsha's sword hammered the invisible armor again and again, never giving Katarina time to breathe, never allowing her to reset her footing. The armor began to hum. Unbelievable, Sokka shouted. She's reading Katarina's attacks in real time and accelerating. Katarina swung harder, faster, but now she was being forced back. Shinsha's blade struck from impossible angles, tapping, slicing, crashing against the unseen barrier. Every hit sent visible ripples through the air, like water struck by a stone. Crack! A thin fracture of light shimmered across the armor. Katarina stared down at her armor. The invisible armor, once seamless, absolute, flickered weakly before shattering into fading motes of light. Her fingers curled. Slowly, she lifted her head and glared at Shinsha, disbelief twisting into something far darker. You broke it, Katarina muttered. Shinsha, still breathing hard from her relentless assault, froze. Her sword lowered instinctively. It's a duel, Shinsha said quickly, forcing calm into her voice. It's fine. Katarina's eyes glazed over. It's not, she said softly. You broke it. Cold sweat ran down Shinsha's spine. That tone, she knew it too well. Her gaze darted across the arena, instinct screaming. There was no opening, no angle, no time. Katarina's magicals began to shift, pressure thickening the air itself. Abyss Anne. Wait, Shinsha shouted, panic breaking through her composure as she raised both hands. Too late. She felt it. The magic Katarina was about to unleash. Abyss Annihilation wasn't just an attack. It was a calamity. Dark magic dragged from the deepest layers of hell, mixed with compressed gravity collapse minus energy folding inward on itself. An explosion capable of tearing dimensions apart. A technique that, if mishandled, could erase stars. Katarina would limit it. The audience would survive with Seal watching. But Shinsha, she wouldn't die, but taking it head-on would definitely hurt her. And if she tried to counter it, the backlash would devastate everything around them. A memory flashed through Shinsha's mind. The labyrinth. Katarina, locked in combat with her. The ground collapsing beneath their feet. Back then, Shinsha had managed to win, barely stopping Katarina from accidentally destroying herself when she spiraled out of control. Shinsha had pushed her too far, and that pressure had been the trigger. The result had been chaos. And regret. She still carried it with her. Never again, Shinsha vowed silently that she would never let that happen again. Shinsha's thoughts raced, gears spinning, desperately calculating outcomes, damage, consequences. There was only one answer. She turned sharply toward the Sokka. I accept defeat, Shinsha shouted. The declaration stunned the arena. Before Sokka could even react, Shinsha was already moving. She bolted from the arena in a blur, abandoning her stance, her sword dissolving into light as she crossed the boundary. Gasps erupted from the crowd. Shinsha didn't stop running until she reached the waiting area. Straight to Seal. The moment she reached her, Shinsha's form collapsed into shimmering light, shrinking rapidly, her humanoid shape dissolving back into her true self. A small, trembling slime. She leapt, and landed squarely in Ciel's lap. Safe. Only then did the pressure lift. Back in the arena, Katarina stood frozen, magic stalled on her lips, staring at the empty ring, confusion flickering across her face. The duel was over, but the silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. A moment later, Sokka announced Katarina's victory and declared her advancement to the finals. The crowd erupted into cheers. Katarina clicked her tongue, then let out a slow sigh, the last traces of her anger finally easing. Still dissatisfied, she puffed out her cheeks in a small pout before turning on her heel and heading toward the waiting room. To be continued.